So it has been a week since Honkai Star Rail Final CBD got released to the public. That means with the final beta coming along, we are very close to the official release of the game. So my aim is to show you how the game works, what you can expect, and whether it's worth your time and attention. Make sure to watch till the very end so you don't miss out on anything. Now before we start, I do want to mention that Honkai Star Rail is indeed a turn-based game. So even if you're not a big fan of turn-based games, keep watching because you may change your mind at the end of the video. So first, let's take a look at the combat. Now once you're in the combat, there's only 3 things you need to pay attention to. The enemy's toughness, turns, whoever is on top will always act first, and the ability points. When you do one normal attack, you get to recover 1 ability points, and once you use an ability, you're gonna consume 1 point. It's relatively simple. And oh yeah, there's also your ult. Your ult is kind of special because it allows you to use them even when it's the enemy's turn. Take a look at here. As soon as Himeko acts, it's going to be the enemy's turn, but if I use my ultimate right here, now take a look at the upper left side. You'll see your character's icon slowly popping out. That means you're currently interrupting their turns, so you get to act first instead of them. And finally, let's take a look at the enemy's toughness. It's kind of complicated if you want a full go-through.
I got you, homie!
I would do it in another video, but to put it simple, by using the corresponding elements to break the enemy's toughness, they will take an additional break damage the moment their toughness depletes to 0, and the enemy takes another damage before they recover their toughness. Now the combat are relatively simple as you can see, but it does get a little bit difficult or more complicated when you're trying to beat the simulated universe, because you have all sorts of buffs that requires you to put in actual thought and came up with your strategy to utilize all those buffs in order to beat the simulated universe. Now let's take a look at the exploration. Now unlike Genshin Impact, it's not a fully open world, actually a semi-open world. And once you open up the map, you'll see those blue indicators, which means those are the ones that you can pick and teleport to. And the one great thing about Honkai Star Rail is take a look at the selection on the upper left of the map. It actually shows you how many treasure chests is left unopened, mystery puzzles that you haven't solved, and some really challenging elite monsters that you haven't fought yet, and a Wartrotter, which looks like a small little space piggy. When you defeat it, it actually gives you 60 Stellar-Jade. And Stellar-Jades are basically either you call it crystal or primogems, right? They're a currency that you use for gacha. Now the exploration side of this game is actually like a candy to your eye. Everything looks amazing in this game, and because it's a semi-open world instead of like Genshin where you have a fully open world, you're able to emphasize on every single details in each map, from the scenery to the buildings to the NPCs to even like small little flowers like this. Everything looks so good. Let me show you a few clips of what I'm actually talking about. Oh, and also, did I mention the background music in this game is absolute bonkers. And after seeing how amazing everything looks in this game and how insanely detailed they are, honestly, just the exploration and the background music alone is enough to convince me to give this game a try, even if you're not a big fan of a turn-based game. Now let's talk about the characters, right? I think a lot of people play MiHoYo's game because of how good the character looks. From Honkai to Genshin Impact to Honkai Star Rail and even to Zen's Zone Zero. All of their characters are so well designed and unique in its own way. And yes, all the characters looks amazing, but I do want to remind you that it's still a gacha game. So some characters are free to obtain, but most of the characters, especially 5 stars, the only way to obtain them is through gacha. So good luck, guys. Now, while we're still on the topic of characters, I want to kind of mention about the leveling for the characters. I'm going to make this simple. Right here you can see every characters have different elements. This is where I'm kind of disappointed because everything looks so similar to the Genshin UI, where you have Light Cone, which is the weapon. Tracers are all the ability upgrades. And relics, which is basically your artifacts. And then here is Eidolon, which is basically constellation. So you could call it, you could use E, E1, E2, E3 instead of C1, C2, C3 in this game. And yeah, that's about it. And also about this one, right? The paths. The paths are kind of important to truly understand what your characters is for. For example, the destruction. They both do damage and they are quite tanky, which is what you have for your main character. The hunt is basically what you want to call the DPS, where they did a lot of damage to one single target, which is good for boss fights. Erudition is a multiple target damage, which is basically an AoE main DPS. The harmonies are buff characters that increase damage or the speed of your team. Debuff applies to the enemy, and then you have preservation, which is a tank character, and an abundance is basically healer. And obviously, I think most Genshin players would be put off by the idea of relics or artifacts, right? Because they would never want to go through another grind in another game doing the same thing, but this time it may actually be different because take a look at this clip. Once you reach level 40, you could salvage your golden artifacts for 10 materials. And for every 100 materials, you can crop a golden relics. And here's the best part. Self-modeling resin that you could obtain from the free monthly pass. You could choose to craft the relic with a main stat that you desire. Let it be HP, defense, damage, crit chance. You can pick anything you want. Actually reduces the amount of time you have to grind and less RNG involved. Even for Genshin's artifacts reroll, it's not as good as this because you literally could not pick a main attribute. It's basically down to luck. It's still full of RNG. For this game, it's not. You could pick the main attribute. So, and thanks to this improvement, I think a lot of you don't actually have to grind too hard in this game. Now, finally, for the most significant part of the game, the main story. I genuinely would not recommend you skipping it because if you've played Honkai or Genshin, you know MiHoYo is really good at storytelling. They even add amazing animations in between the story, so it's almost like you're watching a movie. But overall, don't skip. You won't regret going through the whole story by watching it. And yeah, that's about it. And finally, I would truly recommend you to try this game out even if you're not a big fan of turn-based. This game may actually turn out to be super interesting and you might end up loving turn-based as well. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe because I will be posting more content for Honkai Star Rail after the official release, as well for the guides and tricks for FTP players, which character you should be spending your resource on and which you shouldn't be.